Meanwhile, there is also news back in the United States involving the leading candidate on the Republican side for president, one Donald J. Trump. And this news is a lesson, in fact, for all of you who would like to be attorneys, for you to want to be lawyers. There is no legal value in letting your client take part in your closing arguments. Don't do it. It will not work out in your favor. Now, if you don't agree, just look to the dramatic scenes out of a New York City courtroom today where closing arguments were made in Donald Trump's civil fraud trial, following Judge Arthur Engoron's decision yesterday not to allow Trump to speak, given that he would not follow the rules imposed on everyone else. Trump's lawyers asked again at the end of their closing arguments to allow Trump just a few minutes to speak. Surprisingly, the judge agreed. Unsurprisingly, Trump very quickly went down the path that the judge told him not to go. Trump went on the attack against New York Attorney General Letitia James, saying she hates Trump and is just conducting a political witch hunt. He claimed the case is election interference and that she should be paying him for damages. Trump also went on to attack the judge, claiming that he had his own agenda. And just remember, there's no jury in this trial. It's the judge who's going to be ruling in this case, which he said today that he is trying to do before the end of the month. It's a ruling that has the potential to cause Trump both great financial and reputational harm. The judge has already ruled that Trump and his co-defendants, including his eldest sons, are liable for fraud, for inflating the value of their various properties. What is yet to be determined by Judge Engoron is what financial penalties Trump will have to face. Letitia James came into the case asking for $250 million in penalties, but has since upped that to $370 million. She's also asked for a lifetime ban for Trump from the real estate industry in New York.
At the end of the day, the point is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how rich you are, that no one is above the law, and that the law applies to all of us equally and fairly.
Perhaps this is why the case has appeared to have gotten under Trump's orange-tinted skin more than any other, with Trump repeatedly lashing out in public and on social media against the state attorney general, the judge, and even the judge's clerk, which resulted in a gag order against him. And Trump's rhetoric has had real-world consequences. Just this morning, hours before the start of the closing arguments, Judge Engoron faced a bomb threat at his home. Joining me now is MSNBC reporter Adam Reese, who was in the courtroom today, and Charles Coleman Jr., former Brooklyn prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Gentlemen, thank you for being here and for sitting through our breaking news. You got here on an exciting night. So we're going to make this turn to talk about what happened in court today. You were there, Adam. Tell us what went on.
Well, we started out with the defense making their argument. Again, same argument that we've heard over the past 44 days. No fraud, no victims. Michael Cohen, the prosecution's lead witness, is a convicted liar. We should actually be praising Mr. Trump. He should get a medal. Everything that Mr. Trump did was right. And then they went on and on and on. Mr. Trump had the opportunity. He spoke. It was the same thing. He said, I am innocent. I should be compensated. I am the victim of fraud here. The prosecution, they had their chance to speak. They said more of the same, that essentially, Donald Trump loves to talk about how rich he is. The banks love how rich he is, that they were actually begging him to let them loan him money, that they were rolling out the red carpet. But there was intent to defraud. The evidence is there. And if you don't see it, your head's buried in the sand.
And the thing is, look, I'm not a lawyer, but even I know if you represent yourself, you have a fool for a client. Have you ever, as a prosecutor, seen a defendant in a case, particularly when there's no jury? There's no jury to convince here. There's nobody. It's the judge that gets to decide. Have you ever heard of a defendant in a case like this deciding to give part of the closing argument?
No, Joy, and this is as bizarre as it is consistent with everything that we continue to see out of Trump world here on Earth 1, where everyone continues to operate on Earth 2 in that sort of camp. Even if you had a client who wanted to testify and you thought that that was a bad idea and you still allowed that client to exercise their right to testify, during a closing argument, you are absolutely not allowing your client to leave that judge or that jury with the final impression of what it is that your case represents, particularly if you know or have any inkling that that client is going to get on the stand and get in front of and get in the well and gesticulate and berate the court officers and berate the the judge and berate the entire justice system that is responsible for conducting this hearing that you are an officiant of as a lawyer, you're never going to do that. So yes, this is really absurd. It's really bizarre, but it's also very consistent.
And the thing is, there's a possibility, again, that, you know, coming at this from a non-lawyer's point of view, I could foresee Donald Trump saying, I'm going to appeal if he gets a $500 million, judgment against him and say, they didn't let me speak. Well, he's killed that now because they did let him speak, right? So in a way, did he undermine one of the few things he might have had on appeal?
Well, I don't necessarily know it was that. I think it was more so that the judge made a conscious decision to take away, as you already talked about, an argument that he could have had. He didn't undermine him because he has a history, as you've seen over and over again, in various jurisdictions. I'm going to put pressure on the refs because if they make a bad call from the bench, I now have an issue that I can move on appeal and try to delay, because that's ultimately what I want to do. Judge Engoron said, I'm not going to give you that option here. I'm going to allow you your time to speak, and you're going to walk into a hole, and I'm going to give you enough rope, and you're going to hang yourself.
How did the judge's sort of demeanor sort of change as he was hearing these attacks, including on himself?
Well, you know, the judge has always been amenable originally to let him speak.
Yeah.
And there was this intense wild exchange of emails earlier this week. The judge was going to let him speak. It was a back and forth. He gave him 3 chances. He finally said, now or never. You need to decide, are you going to agree to these restrictions that I'm putting in place? And when Mr. Trump started to speak, by the way, Judge Engoron was laying out the restrictions, and Mr. Trump did not let him even finish. He just launched into his diatribe. It got to the point where the judge said, Mr. Kise, you need to control your client. It was the end of that, and they were out of the room.
Chris Kise, by the way, for those of you who don't remember all of the playing cards here, he's the guy who got the $3 million or $2 million up front to represent Donald Trump. Did you get the sense, and could you tell, if the idea for him to speak was his idea or the lawyers? Because I cannot imagine it was Chris Kise's idea.
Right. All along, it's him making the calls. And in those emails that I just referred to, you could see in the writing, there was almost a cut and paste. This was not Chris Kise speaking. This was Donald Trump speaking, referring to this prosecution. It's a political witch hunt.
They're performing for him. How high do you think this could end up going? I mean, Letitia James has now gone up to 370. Could it go higher?
I don't necessarily know if it goes higher, but I do think it's going to go higher than where we initially started. I think that Donald Trump's defense team was very smart to invoke language around corporate death penalty, because what that's intended to do is to get the judge to back off just a little bit, because he's worried about that judgment being appealed for being too draconian or too severe. Now, that being said, I do think that we could see in upwards of $300 million, which would be very, very bad for the Trump organization.
Sure.
But I don't know that we're going to get to 270. I think we will be higher than where Letitia James started, but not as high as she is now.
Let's put up the list of other things that are coming up, like Donald Trump still has this case. You still have the appeals court in the D.C. appeals court case, right, that he has to deal with, of whether or not he has absolute immunity. You've got this question of whether, I mean, I can't even remember all of it. He's got also...
You've got Miami. You've got hush money. You've got D.C.
E. Jean Carroll.
Atlanta.
And let's not forget Alvin Bragg, who started all of this with the first criminal indictment right here in Manhattan. He's oftentimes overlooked. This is a guy who has a very full dance card. And Joy, one of the things I wanted to point out is we've gone to a place where he has now amalgamated himself as a defendant and a campaign and a candidate into one thing. These are campaign stops as much as they are court appearances.
Yeah. And the other piece of it is that this is a settled matter. I just want to put up here, to remind folks again, this is not the most sort of serious case in terms of criminality. I mean, obviously stealing documents is worse. Oh, I think we might be out of time. I think we're out of time. All right, well, never mind. I'm not going to put up the lies he told about his buildings. I'm actually just going to say goodbye to my guests, Adam Rees and Charles Coleman Jr. It's been a wild night, y'all. Thank you. We're continuing to follow tonight's breaking news. The U.S. and U.K. strike Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. In Yemen. And coming up on the readout, Haley and DeSantis continue their sad battle for second place behind Trump, who is too busy bragging about destroying a woman's right to make her own reproductive decisions to even notice. The readout continues after this.
Feel any better? I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, what is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah. I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I was so damn caught on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
The Megatron.
This was just a diversion. Security teams bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Dees! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark. General, watch out! General! Need to immediately evacuate. Hold on. National security advisor. Stand down. Pushing it out. Failed the mission separation. Sending amateurs for a suicide mission.
So I had to